And so right now I'm going to go ahead and welcome our wonderful speaker today. We have Carl Takei. Carl is the senior staff attorney at the ACLU Trone Center for Justice and Equality. So I want you guys to give him a big round of applause or quiet applause. So go ahead, Carl, take it away.
Thanks, Brittany. All right, I'm gonna throw the PowerPoint up on the screen. And like Brittany said, I'm gonna be, there's a lot of stuff to go through here. So I'm gonna just be stopping, different points in the presentation to do a little bit of Q&A on each of the topics. But this is about knowing your rights in police encounters. So like Brittany said, I'm from the ACLU. Our mission is to ensure the promise of the Bill of Rights for everyone and expand the reach of the Bill of Rights guarantees. We're founded by a small group of activists in 1920 in the middle of a huge, amount of scaremongering about communists and socialists. And when there were all kinds of anti-immigrant raids going on. And we're continuing that legacy today. And the work that I do is really focused on, what police do and the role of police in society. So one cautionary note I want to say first before I start, I'm going to be talking about two different kinds of things here. One is what the law requires of police, and the other is the strategies that could reduce the risk that a police officer will hurt or kill you. And these are two different ideas. And especially when we're talking about ways to reduce the risk of being harmed by a police officer, this is something where, properly, like de-escalating isn't something that each individual person should have to do, but and that ought to be the responsibility of police officers. But in practice, you can't assume that officers are going to behave in a way that protects your safety, or that they're even going to respect your rights after you assert them. And so you'll sort of see that tension going through. One other little disclaimer, I'm speaking nationally. This is general information to help you know your rights. If you need legal advice about your specific situation, you know that state laws sometimes vary. And if you need legal advice about, specific facts in your life, please make sure to consult a lawyer who's licensed in the state where you live. So I'm going to start with one of the really common situations, getting stopped or pulled over by law enforcement. And I'm going to start with just a quick question. I don't think I can do a formal poll with the controls I have. So maybe let's just, if folks, put a yes or no in the chat. Here's a scenario that I want you to think about. You're sitting on a long distance Greyhound bus and it takes a scheduled stop. 3 police officers board the bus. One of them stands over you, putting his face less than 18 inches from yours, shows you his badge and tells you he's conducting drug interdictions. And he says, "Do you have any bags on the bus?" You nod and point to your backpack. He looks at the backpack and says, "Do you mind if I check it?" What do you think? Do you have to let him open your backpack? And just throw your answers in the chat.
It says that my chat is disabled.
Oh.
Brittany, were you able to
Brittany,
get that, Carl? Were you
yeah,
able to get mine?
I saw your chat.
Mine, but everybody else's is disabled. Are you guys able to give use the reactions like a thumbs up or any of those emoji reactions?
Yeah, can you do, yeah, so yeah, just use the emoji reactions. I see a couple people.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and so so far, like everybody has put a reaction in. You're right. This is this is not a situation where you have to say yes. And in fact, this is from a Supreme Court case, and the person, let the officer open their bag, and they ended up, having all of the evidence from what the officer found in their bag admitted in a criminal case, because the court said, well, this was a totally voluntary situation, even with all the, sort of signs of authority and the fact that the officer was so close to the person consented. And so this is a really critical point about what goes on in police interactions. There are all of these points where you're under pressure, but there are ways in which you can assert your rights. First is you have the right to remain silent. And if you're going to assert the right, the one thing that's a little strange is you should say, like, I am asserting my right to remain silent, and then just don't talk. Because there's a difference between saying it and then saying nothing, and just saying nothing at all. So it's better to just say, I'm asserting my right to remain silent. Second is, like what happened on this Greyhound bus, you do not have to consent to a search. And if this ends up resulting in a criminal case, you are in a much better situation if you did not consent. So if the officer asks you, to go through your bag or to search you, make sure you are, making clear that you are not consenting. This isn't necessarily going to stop the officer from doing the search, but it's going to be really helpful later, especially if there's a criminal case that comes out of it. If you're arrested, you have the right to an attorney, and you like a public defender. I think pretty much everybody here will be able to qualify for a public defender, especially if you're a minor. And you generally don't have to answer questions about where you were born, whether you're a US citizen, or how you entered a country. There are some narrow exceptions, like when you're, at a port of entry, entering the United States, where you have to answer those kinds of questions. But especially when you're talking about like local police, out in public or at your home, these are questions that you don't have to answer. So what is the most important question you can ask when an officer stops you? It is, officer, am I free to go? Because a lot of times police officers are just sort of, using the fact that they have a badge, that they have an air of authority around them to, keep you there, even though you have a legal right to leave. And if you ask the officer directly, am I free to go? Then it becomes the officer's responsibility to either say, yes, you're free to go. And if you're free to go, you can just walk away. Say, all right, good afternoon, officer. I'll see you later. If they say you are not free to go, then that means that they are detaining you against your will. And that means that, more of your rights come into play. But if anybody is unsure about whether the officer's detaining you or whether you're free to go, then that creates a lot of advantages for the officer. And if the officer wants to search you or your things, again, the most important question is, are you asking for my consent or are you ordering me to do this? Because once you give your consent to be searched, then it's sort of everything else goes out the window. And you are protecting yourself if you are making clear that you are not consenting to any searches. If you've been stopped by the police in public, like, on a street or in a car, some of the things that you can do to reduce risk are stay calm, don't run, resist, or obstruct the officers, don't lie or give false documents, because even if you did nothing else wrong, just the fact of lying or giving a false document to the officer can give the officer a reason to arrest you. And just, for your own safety, keep your hands where the police officer can see them. And of course, we know from Philando Castile and so many other people who have been killed by police, even when they are doing exactly what the police officer tells them to do. None of this is foolproof, but it does help reduce your risk. there's the special case of stop and frisks, which it's not a full arrest. You're not being handcuffed, but you're also not free to leave. And it's supposed to be a very limited and brief search where the officer is just keeping their hands on the outside of your clothing and looking for weapons and only reaching inside your pockets if they, find, something that either feels like it could be a weapon or that, is very clearly drugs or something illegal. And these are supposed to be based on reasonable suspicion, which is a lower standard than what's needed for a full arrest. The thing about this has led to litigation in so many different places about police officers just, like rolling up on especially Black teenagers without having reasonable suspicion and using stop and frisks as an excuse to do much more invasive searches. And so, here there's just all around the country, there's the situation of what your rights are and what police officers do in a lot of situations. Another situation is if you're in a car and you've been pulled over by the police. The driver is the one being pulled over. Both the driver and the passengers have the right to remain silent. And the driver is generally not free to leave, but if you're a passenger in the car, you can ask the officer, am I free to leave? And if the officer says yes, then a lot of times the best thing to do is, say, all right, officer, I'm going to be leaving the car, and just leave. If you're the driver, keep your driver license, registration, and proof of insurance somewhere that's easy to reach. And again, this is a really dangerous situation for you when you're reaching for these documents. Make sure to tell the officer that you're reaching for them so that they don't think it is something that is dangerous to them. There are some solutions out there, like putting all of your documents in a clear plastic bag. And it's really unfortunate that is out there, but that is something that can make it safer for you if you have an officer who's especially jittery. Now, the other thing with police encounters in public is filming the police. You all know Darnella Frazier was heroic in the way that she stood there and filmed Officer Chauvin killing George Floyd. You can see here on some of the police body cam footage, she's doing literally everything right that you should be doing when you are filming the police. She's standing back. She's holding up her phone clearly so that you can see that she is filming. And she is just, there to stand witness and to record what's going on. So, these are all important things, like stay at a safe distance, don't interfere, don't try to hide the fact you're recording. And then if a police officer comes over and tries to confiscate your phone or ask, wants to view the video you've taken without a warrant, they don't, you don't have to turn that over to them unless they have a warrant, and they cannot ever delete your recording, even if they have a warrant. The other thing is, if you are, after everything is over, in addition to the video, just make sure to write down any other information that you remember so that, it's all in your notes, and it's something that you don't have to try and remember later. Like just get it all down in writing as much as you can. And the same goes for, say if you're a passenger in a car that's being pulled over, same ideas apply here. All right, I'm going to stop here for questions and answers. Brittany, I don't know if the chat function is still locked down.
So let's just moving forward, everybody just raise your hand, use the raise your hand emoji, and then I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. Any questions? Okay. Well, if there's no questions, we can keep moving forward. And if you do have any questions throughout, just go ahead and just use the raise your hand emoji and we'll just move forward that way.
All right. So the next situation is law enforcement coming to your house. And so all this starts, of course, when they are knocking or banging on the door, and you sort of see them through the peephole. And it is very important. Do not invite the officer inside. Talk through the door. You can, if they have papers like a warrant, they can pass that under the door. And you do not have to let them in unless they have a warrant signed by a judge that lists your address or your name. And even if they have a warrant, you still have the right to remain silent. So this is another situation where, the officers may try to chat you up while they are searching. And anything that you say is something that could be used against you. So it's better just to not say anything, and don't answer questions. You don't have any obligation to answer questions. And if it's not your house, this is another special situation. The scenario, you're at a friend's house, you hear someone banging on the door and open it, and a police officer is standing there and asks to step inside the house. Do you have to let the officer inside? And you can use the reactions to give an answer.
No.
Yeah, everybody is saying no. That is totally the right answer. So in this situation, the best thing to do is to just tell the officer, like, this is not my house and I don't have the authority to let you inside. I'm just a guest here. And, regardless of what you say about inviting them in or not, if they know that you're a guest and you have no authority, they're not supposed to go inside. So, this is especially for, the sake of your friend who lives there, it is better to just be very upfront about the fact that I don't have the authority to let you inside. Sorry, I don't live here. Any questions right now?
While we wait for questions, Carl, I actually have a question. I'm 35 and I still get uncomfortable anytime I'm pulled over by police officers. And one thing that I like to do is pull out, like if I'm by myself, I'll just like call my husband or something and put it on speaker just so, he can hear the whole situation. Do you have to alert them that you're doing that? Should you alert them? Is that okay to do?
It's probably better to let them know that you have somebody on the phone with you, or if you're recording, that you're recording, for the same reasons that it's when you are taking a video, if you're getting pulled over, or if you're live streaming. There have been cases where police officers have accused people using wiretap laws of eavesdropping on them with their phones. And so if you're very open about that, then it's a situation where everybody knows that it's being recorded, or that there's somebody listening in on the phone. And the police officer doesn't have any privacy rights when they are, on duty and stopping, somebody in their car, or stopping somebody on a public street. It's best to be upfront about when you're recording, or when you have somebody listening on the phone.
Okay, and then oh, go ahead.
So I was like, this happened to me when I was like in middle school. I was in 7th grade and like I was in alternative school, and like I had a panic attack, and my principal didn't know what to do. And since it was an alternative school, we had a lot of cops there. So the cop didn't know what to do, so he handcuffed me because I was having a panic attack and took me to the police station. My mom was very concerned why he did that and they did not call my mom instead. So was that like, how could they done that better?
A lot of ways. I mean, one, there's just a nationwide problem in schools where there's a lot of money to put cops in schools, and there's not enough money for counselors. And um, you know, it, in these situations where the principal doesn't know what to do when somebody, when you've got a student having a panic attack, um, they should have people who, are actually, you know, trained and educated in like taking care of people instead of somebody who's going to put handcuffs on you. So I think that's the first part, that, like the school officials should be like, trying to get the resources to actually provide like caring responses. But then the other part is, on the police officer side, if the school officials get the police involved, that's like, this is another issue where, police officers, nationwide police academies, I think they get about 60 hours of training on shooting and less than 8 hours of training on de-escalation, on communication. And, so that's another area where the police ought to either know better ways of handling people who are having, emotional or mental health crises, and, sort of addressing it, or figuring out that they need to refer it to somebody who's actually better trained to address it. So yeah, it's a huge national issue. And I think your story is unfortunately really familiar.
Yeah, because like they end up putting a charge on me for assault because I was panicking and I end up hitting him because I was in a panic mode.
Yeah, and that's a situation where um, if we had better systems in place, then that, even if it got to the point of the police officer accusing you of assault, that like the DA should never have done anything with those charges. They should have been dismissed. So yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that.
I'll move to the next person, Kari.
Hi, I'm Carrie. And I just had a question to Carl about, you keep differentiating between like saying public when they stop you in public. What does it mean for to be stopped in public then?
So that is in situations where it's like on the street or in I think it places where it's not like inside some privately owned building. The rules can get a little weird there. Like a mall, for example, you start having rules that the private property owner might be imposing about, what can go on there.
Thank you.
And then one more question from Latasha. Latasha, are you there? Yeah, we can hear you now.
So I have a question going back to where someone, when they entered into the house, of like you're a guest there, are the police allowed to ask you questions at that point? And can you still remain silent, have the right to remain silent still, because you're a guest there?
Yeah, I mean, you always have the right to remain silent. And that's, I think, the police are always going to do what they want to do. And, in the moment. And the one thing that you can do is, sort of make clear where the boundaries are by asserting your rights to remain silent, making sure that they know that you're not consenting to be searched, and that, honestly, officers may react badly to that. Also, like if you're filming the police, and a police officer makes an illegal demand to take your phone, in the moment, yes, assert your rights, but you also need to make decisions for your own safety about how you assert those rights. And in the end, if like once you've sort of made clear that the officer is crossing a line, how much you say after that.
I just was curious to know, because sometimes I know police officers will come and you're a guest and they'll say, well, who's all in there? Who's in the house? Like, you still can remain silent. So that's some good advice. I just need to know that. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for those questions. We'll go ahead and move to the next topic.
Yeah, so this is if you're arrested. Just again, say you wish to remain silent, ask for a lawyer, and don't try to explain anything, don't answer any questions. This is a situation where you are in really grave danger, and the police, they can lie to you. They can tell you all kinds of things about, maybe if you were arrested with a group of friends, they can lie to you and tell you tell lies about what your friend said about you. They can tell lies about whether or not there is, a lawyer or a parent or some other trusted adult waiting for you in the police station. And so that the best thing that you can do to protect yourself, knowing that they are allowed to lie to you, is to just stay, assert your right to remain silent and assert your right to a lawyer. And you have to do this as clearly as possible. There's a whole string of court decisions where people say, they're trying to be polite and they're like saying like, well, I think I'd like to have a lawyer. And in a lot of places that is not enough. You have to say just like, I'm asserting my right to a lawyer, or like, I won't talk without a lawyer here. Just like leave no room for interpretation. And of course, if you can't pay for a lawyer, you have the right to a free public defender. And just like, do not say anything, don't sign anything, don't make any decisions without a lawyer, because you're in really serious danger, especially once you've been arrested. And for making a phone call, if you call a lawyer, the police are not allowed to listen in. But for anybody else that you call, they can listen in, and they often will. So just be aware, of whatever you're saying, that line, you can't assume that it's private unless you're talking to a lawyer. And then, while you're being arrested, even if you believe the arrest is unfair, don't resist arrest. Follow the officer's commands, because anything that you do that's resisting arrest, then that's another charge that can be added on. So I don't know if folks have any questions at this point.
While we wait, we have one question. Cassie?
Yeah, so I'm a social worker, and I work with a lot of teenagers that have ran away or something like that. And when they are detained or put into custody, I mean, they're not arrested necessarily, but like they're asked to sign their rights. They're asked to talk with me. Like I ask and talk with them. Like, so I just want to be clear, like, is that, I mean, they have an opportunity for a lawyer at that point in time? I don't, that's probably not the same. I'm thinking, I guess I was just curious.
So yeah, there's basically the two levels of, detention where you're not free to leave, but it's not a full arrest. And that's like the stop and frisk situation. And then there's a full arrest where the officers have probable cause. And they're, in either situation, you still have the right to remain silent. You have the right to refuse to sign anything that's put in front of you. But you know, it's most clear that the right to have a lawyer comes in when it's a full arrest, but that shouldn't stop you from asking for a lawyer, because if you're being questioned and you're being held against your will by the police, saying I'm exercising my right to remain silent and I won't talk unless I have a lawyer, those are the two most powerful things that you can do to assert your rights. Because especially once you ask for a lawyer, they have to stop any sort of questioning of you while you are in their custody until a lawyer comes.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, a quick question about once you are actually arrested, how quickly do they have to allow you to make that phone call? And then how long are they allowed to hold you there before like any charges are pressed or anything like that?
That varies a lot from place to place. So I can't give one answer. I know, Louisiana, I know is especially bad, that people end up even for misdemeanors sitting in jail for weeks before they end up having any kind of court hearing. And a lot of other places, it's a matter of a day or a couple of days, but that there's a lot of variation.
Okay. And then about the phone call, that varies too. It's not like a set time they have to allow you to make a phone call.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
So this is like a question, I guess. So I've never been technically arrested, but I've had charges on me. So I never understood how that worked. Like, how do you have to be legally arrested to have charges on you?
No. One of the things is you can get a summons for a court date, and then it's the same criminal charges as if you had been arrested, but it's just you don't spend any time in a police station or in jail because of that. And that's actually one of the things that I think has changed a lot. That like in New York City, there are a lot of especially like drug possession offenses where it used to be people would all really frequently get arrested, and now it's much more common to do a summons.
Yeah, because I've only been in court one time, and that was when I was like really young, but I haven't been in court any other time for my charges. So yeah.
All right, any other questions about arrests, or should we move on to the next?
Yeah, let's move to the next. Don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. So this part is law enforcement and minors. For those of you who are under 18, how do you think your rights in police encounters outside of school are different from the rights of adults? The answer actually is they're pretty much the same. And the real differences are what happens in school. So inside of school, you have First Amendment rights to speak out, hand out flyers and petitions, wear expressive clothing, as long as you don't disrupt the functioning of the school or violate school policies that are sort of what's called neutral, that they don't hinge on the message that's being expressed. So that's more limited than your First Amendment rights outside of school, but you do have First Amendment rights with those extra limits. School officials have more ability to search you and your belongings inside school than police officers have in the outside world. But strip searches are not allowed in school. The one thing that is, I think, very inconsistent around the country is, a lot of times with school resource officers, there's a lot of active litigation now about whether they are acting as police officers in school with the same limitations on what they can do, for searching students as in the outside world, or if they're functioning as school officials and have those expanded search rights. For the ACLU, our position is that that like they are police officers, they should be governed by the same rules as police officers everywhere. But that's something that's really under active litigation right now. Any questions at this point?
Carl, as a minor, how quickly do law enforcement have to notify some sort of guardian?
That is something where there's not really a national answer. That varies.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we can keep moving forward.
Okay. So if your rights have been violated by the police, most important thing, write down everything you can remember, the officer's badge number or patrol car numbers, the agency that they work for, especially, in some places like Washington, D.C., there are dozens of different police agencies that all have jurisdiction in D.C. And, even in most cities, you at least have city police and the sheriff, which are two different agencies. Get contact information if there are any witnesses. If you're hurt, get medical attention and get photographs taken of the injuries. And again, write everything down that happened to you. And then, the one thing that you can do is file a written complaint with the Internal Affairs Division or a civilian complaint board. A lot of times these complaints won't end up, doing much for you individually, but especially if it's an agency that has a really bad record, or an individual officer that has a really bad record, it's creating a paper trail that's important. When there are these sort of bigger patterns of behavior that are showing up in the agency. All right, so that is all of the slides that I have. And I think we'll just sort of open it up to a general Q&A. The other thing is, if you want to get in touch with me, this is my email address, and I'm also pretty active on Twitter. So that's my Twitter handle up there.
So I encourage everyone at this time to take a screenshot of this, because Carlos just gave us some really valuable information. And if you do ever have questions, he would be the perfect person to contact and just ask away. Know this topic is might be uncomfortable for some people. So if you do have things that you want to ask privately, please screenshot this and feel free to reach out to Carl. And then Carl, just to kind of wrap it up, thank you again for your time. If you could just give, since you did give so much information, if you could just give like 3 takeaways that you really want everyone to leave with, what would those 3 things be?
Yeah, I think that would be, one, just make sure that, if you're stopped by the police, ask the question, am I free to go? And anytime that a police officer is saying something that, it's sort of the words are like, if you write them down on paper, they sound like they're asking, but, it's sort of they're barking, and it sounds like they're barking an order at you. These are situations where you really need to ask the question, are you asking for my consent, or are you ordering me to do this? Because a lot of times they're technically asking for your consent. And if you just sort of let that slide, then the way that it gets written down in the police report is, I asked for consent and the person said yes. So, just make sure that you sort of, your rights about, consent, about being free to leave or not, and about your right to remain silent. And, just keep those in mind anytime that you're in an interaction with a police officer.
Thanks for that. And then we did touch on public defenders a little bit. So, if you can't afford your lawyer, you can get a public defender. Are you allowed to request a different public defender if you get one that you're not comfortable with, or how does that work?
Yeah, that varies, like exactly how you would do that. But sometimes public defenders are from, sort of, they're all staff attorneys at the public defender agency. Sometimes they're public, they're just appointed by the court, and they're private attorneys who are taking individual appointed cases. So depending on the situation, you might be able to talk to the agency, or you might have to raise it directly to the judge to try and get a different attorney assigned. But that's something where, like, you do have the ability to ask to have somebody different assigned to your case.
Is there any final questions or comments or anything that anybody wants to make? Well, I just want to thank you again, Carl, so much for your time. If you wouldn't mind putting up that last slide again, just in case somebody didn't get your information so they can screenshot it. Great picture too, so.
Thanks. And just one caveat, like I said at the beginning, my knowledge is sort of national. A lot of times, there are questions that are very state specific that I'll end up just referring you to somebody else because I can't answer it directly. But
that's good to know, because it does
Yeah.
seem like, depending on what state you're in, there's some different laws and things. And so.
Yeah.
Great. Well, after this, everybody, just so you know, make sure you stay tuned once again to the end. Of course, there's more great sessions coming, but there's also great prizes at the end. And so you have to be present to win those prizes. After this, it's going to be a quick break. So don't exit out or anything. You're going to be automatically directed back into the main homeroom that we were in. You're going to have, a break then, and then you'll be able to choose your next session. So get ready for that. That's going to start in about 20 seconds. So you'll just be shuffled into a different main room, but just make sure you stay engaged. Make sure you ask questions. Make sure, you get everyone's information. Everyone's here to help you and just give you valuable insights and help however they can. So, make sure you take down their information and follow up. And so we got about 3 more seconds, but thanks for joining this session.